Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off.
Blast off on another unbelievable episode of the Hyper-Anomalous Esoteric Research Organization podcast, aka HEROparanormal, broadcasting just south of the old Sherman Ranch at Space Wolf Research. My name is Ryan, the anomalous ambassador of the airwaves, bringing you an unbelievably mysterious episode today. Okay, guys. Before we get to the goods, I'd like to let you know that if you haven't subscribed to HEROparanormal on Patreon, you're seriously missing out. Not only missing out on a ton of early releases, but missing out on a ton of content behind the paywall. Everyone knows you can also keep up with episodes of HEROparanormal on Podbean at HEROparanormal.com. And please, please, please subscribe to HEROparanormal on YouTube. Although they have hit me with strikes and seem unwilling to monetize the podcast no matter the amount of listeners, I've been told liking, subscribing, and sharing the podcast on your social media will help reverse the shadow ban and break through the algorithms of control. Thanks to all of you in advance. On today's podcast, we have none other than Brian Allan, well-known author of over 14 books, delving into the secrets and mysteries of our times. He is also the UK chief editor of Phenomena magazine. You may have heard of it. He has been writing articles, embracing all kinds of esoteric, Gnostic, and paranormal themes for over 25 years. Brian not only writes about the topics many are unwilling to even open their minds to, but he visits locations, such as the Templar-inspired and many say built Roslyn Chapel. He believes that within this holy and mysterious building there is a hidden portal leading to a source of gnosis so important that it was hidden away in a vault beyond the reach of man and sealed there with a lock of such complexity that it requires a conscious act of belief coupled to several types of frequency to open it. I don't doubt this for a minute. Brian knows his stuff, and this makes the Da Vinci Code look like child's play. Brian has tackled many of the deepest subjects in a book so cleanly outlined, well written, and easy to understand that it should be on everyone's Christmas list. In fact, I will donate a copy to the first listener to like, subscribe to HEROparanormal on Patreon, and share this YouTube episode on their Facebook social media. Just direct message us with proof to HEROparanormal at Facebook, and it's yours. The book is that good, and I believe it needs to be spread far and wide. Brian Allan has been a contributor and guest, as well as consultant to many TV documentaries, dealing with the paranormal, commissioned by the BBC TV, ITV, Polish TV, the Discovery Channel, the History Channel, plus many independent TV production companies, both in the UK and US, and has been a guest on many international radio and television shows. He is also a regular, giving presentations on a variety of subjects at UFO and paranormal themed conferences around the world. Brian Allan, welcome to the HEROparanormal podcast.
Hey, thank you very much for having me on. I had trouble recognizing myself there, but I realized, yeah, that must be me. Pardon me.
This is great. This is a great book. There are so many directions we can go in. What caused you to write the book? It's so well written, and I really think it's good for people who are involved in these topics as well as those who are not.
Well, I guess you're right. Well, the reason why I wrote the book was that I never stopped writing. this is one of the reasons that I'm always writing something, whether it's an editorial for the magazine, and in writing the editorial, this will trigger something off my mind. Oh, I'll write about that. So I write about it, and I just usually file them away. Some I put in the magazine, but I never put them under my own name because my ego doesn't need that amount of stroking. I usually put them under a pseudonym of some kind. I'd been using one was Milton Grover for a while, which is almost an anagram of Grover's Mill, which is, where the Martians landed in the US version of War of the Worlds. But so I use that for an anagram, for a pseudonym, I should say. But it's stuff I've had lying around, and I had a look at it, and I said, there's themes in here. So I tried to draw them into themes, and I put them together, and offered. Initially, before I offered it as a book, I offered them to Reality Entertainment across in California, a guy called Warren Croyle. It's his company. And Warren had a look and he said, well, would like to use some of the stuff out of it and do a documentary. So I said, yeah, whatever. So there's also a documentary. It's got the same artwork, I might add, also called Book of Secrets, Aliens, Ghosts and Ancient Mysteries. And it's available too from Reality Entertainment. But the book, I offered it to Philip Mantle. Now, I don't know if you know Philip Mantle, but Philip is probably one of the best-known ufologists in this country. He's in the UK. He's been, and international as it happens. And he recently started up his own publishing house called Flying Disc Press. And when he knew, and I've known Phil for years, for his 20, 30 years, I guess. So when Phil knew I had this new book coming out, he just pretty much snapped my hand off to get it. And that's actually the second book of mine, or second book I've been involved in that he published. This is the first book I've written myself. So the previous one I wrote with a guy called Barry Fitzgerald, and that was, he actually was kind enough to publish that one as well. But yeah, it was ideas that had floating around. I put them together, and the book is published. So there you go.
Amazing book. And yes, the artwork is absolutely amazing. And Philip is the best. I actually hope to write a book through Flying Disc Press as soon as I get my toddlers a little bit older. I've done nothing but self-publish up to now, and it seems like Philip he really is the best. And Barry Fitzgerald, I actually know him personally. He's
good.
He's great as well. He's come out to Space Wolf Research Base Camp in Utah, and he's another investigator, much like yourself, that visits these locations. Let's get to this, because I'm fascinated by Roslyn Chapel. You've been there, and this is an area that I hope to someday. It's one of those bucket list places that I think many people interested in the mysteries of our times and the esoteric, would only dream to visit. You've been there. Tell us about it.
I've been there many, many times. But to be honest, I'd never even heard of Roslyn Chapel till I read a book back in the 1980s called The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. And it's mentioned in it and two or three books after that. So in the 1980s, the late 1980s was the first time I actually visited the chapel. And when we visited, it's not a lot like, well, obviously it looks the same, but the visitor sort of side of it, it was very, very basic, pretty much a wooden hut, wooden shed. And you just walk through that and out into the chapel, pay your money and enter the chapel. But now it's a much more glossy production. They've got a cafe, gift shop, exit through the gift shop sort of thing. But it's a marvelous place. Now, we first visited there seriously in late 1980, but it wasn't until the 1990s that I started taking interest in the esoteric side of the place, because a medium who had been there with me told me that this is rather more than a building, an ornately carved building. It is actually a spiritual machine. So I said, what do you mean? So she said, well, if you had cameras set up watching this place 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, you would find things would change, details would change, because it's not 100% locked in this space-time. There's about 1% of it, 0.5% of it locked elsewhere in space-time. So they also told me that there was they called it an astral doorway in the chapel. Now, I wasn't too sure what that meant at the time, but I made it my business to find out. But however, in the mid-1990s, I guess 1995, 96, I paid a visit again with mediums, and my wife was there as well. And we decided to do some looking around, real close looking at the place. Now, I was always interested in this concept of the astral doorway. Now, they said that the astral doorway is right up against what is called the St. Matthew altar, because although it's called Roslyn Chapel, the correct name is the Collegiate Church of St. Matthew, believe it or not. And it is actually the St. Matthew altar, this portal, called the astral doorway, they call it the portal, I call it, is in there. Now, the other thing was that one of the legends associated with Roslyn Chapel is that the physical gateway to heaven is in there, okay, down in the vaults. Now, it could be that this is a badly or a poorly remembered reference to this astral doorway. That, because the medium said things go two ways out of this, and you go through it, stuff can come out of it the other way as well. So this reference to a physical gateway to heaven might be a reference to this astral doorway. But when we were there on that particular date, I was taking, I was videoing everything I could get to, because the trustees at that time weren't too bad about it, but you certainly wouldn't get to do that now. They just wouldn't have it. But at the time, my wife was videoing me, and I was standing with my back against the St. Matthew altar. I should say that the St. Matthew altar is in what is called the Lady Choir, or more correctly called the Retro Choir, which is in the east end, quite appropriately, of the chapel. And there are three altars in the Lady Chapel, right up against the wall. They're about roughly just a little over chest height. They're not too big, and they're not too deep. So there are three of them, and there's actually a fourth altar called the High Altar, strangely enough, which is above the steps that lead down into the crypt. But anyway, we'll concentrate on the St. Matthew altar on the left-hand side as you face it. Now, I was standing with my back to the altar, and I was chatting to my wife, and all of a sudden, and it was most disconcerting, I could feel my arms starting to float up from my sides, literally float up in the air. And it was a conscious effort to put them back down again. And when I relaxed again, they started to float up again. And I had the sensation, the feeling to me was as if something was pushing me up by the heels, like it's like a hydraulic rams under my feet almost. And I was getting lifted up from the floor. And I tumbled forward a little bit, and I said, "Whoa!" And I said to my wife, "Did you see that?" She says, "Yeah." So I took the camera. I said, "Stand up with your back against the altar and just relax your hands." And her hands started to come up as well. So there was something very strange happening at the altar. Well, we walked away from there, and one of the media, and I had a camera, and actually it wasn't the video camera, it was just an ordinary still camera, a digital still camera. And they said, "Oh, something's happening at the altar." So I turned round and pushed the shutter release as I was on the turn, so the image is slightly blurred. But the image I got was of the centre of the altar, which has got what they call the engraved Sinclair cross, is actually in the centre of the altar. I mean, the chapel was built by Sir William Sinclair. And the actual centre boss of the little altar is brightly illuminated. Now, I have no idea why, because it wouldn't have been, the camera wasn't on flash, because a flash wouldn't have done that. It would have illuminated the whole altar. And a flashlight wouldn't have done it either, because it would have been too spread. So you've got the centre boss of the altar brightly lit up. And I always couldn't figure out why that should be. But we left it, we left the chapel, went home, and I thought about this. Because also in the ceiling of the Lady Chapel, there are bands of stone cubes, all intricately carved, arcing up to the ceiling. And these stone cubes are coming from like little stone musical instruments, which are getting played by little stone angels, which are all part of the carvings. So it's obvious that these cubes represented musical notes. But what were they? Now, each face of each cube is slightly different. So that it would appear that they're representing musical notes. Now, there's something called a Chladni, Chladni, a Chladni pattern. Now, at the time, the only way they could reproduce these things, this is going back, I think the guy Ernst Chladni, I think it was called the father of he was the father of some modern, father of some sort of physics, frequencies. He had the name for this. I can't actually remember it offhand, but he decided that he could reproduce notes, musical notes, by taking a thin piece of metal or a thin piece of glass, clamping it at a corner, sprinkling fine powder on it, then drawing a bow down it. And whatever note the bow took, it set up patterns in the finely scattered sand or whatever they were using on the surface. And we formed the opinion that these patterns in the cubes were musical notes, and they actually conformed to something. So I conferred with a guy called Bill Downey, who was a musician, and we decided we'd try and figure this out. Now, and I'm not going to say that we'll work this out ourselves. It was sheer luck, sheer chance that we actually happened on what the actual note was. And it is an augmented fourth. It's a dissonant note, in other words. They were designed to create, if you like, a feeling of unease. I think you'll hear one in the theme tune to The Simpsons, believe it or not, on TV. That contains the Smoke on the Water, Deep Purple. That's another one that contains this particular note. And they were designed to produce feelings of unease. And the Catholic Church actually banned them completely in church music in the Middle Ages. Because apart from anything else, as well as producing feelings of unease, it would appear that given, if they were in a specific size of building, they would create a frequency that would cause people in it to experience, if you like, elevated feelings, to contact the divine, sort of trip out, if you like, on the actual note being produced, for want of a better word. And the church wouldn't have that because it was so arbiter of who would or would not experience that sort of spiritual revelation. So they banned them. But obviously, that was all changed as time moved on. It all came back. But we came up with this particular note. It's called the Devil's Chord, I might add, quite appropriately. Mm. And we took the musical notes and broke them down into frequencies. Now, there's an F sharp, which is 370 hertz, C, which is 523 hertz, and the A, which is 880 hertz. And we created this chord, and back in 2005, 2006, it was either of those 2 years, we managed to get access to the chapel. And we had the note transcribed onto a laptop computer. And so we took the laptop into the chapel. And we started, trying out the different frequencies on it, especially the Devil's Chord. Now, nothing happened very much until one of the guys who was with us, he didn't actually know he wasn't too sure what he was supposed to do, so he went down into the crypt and he started toning. And when he started toning, the chapel created a note entirely on its own. Because what you had was the Devil's Chord coming from the laptop and this guy downstairs toning. And we could hear this going on and we go, oh, that's nice, that's good. So all of a sudden, we had a third tone kicked off. And we said, oh, where did that come from? The chapel was creating a tone on its own. Then slightly, a few seconds later, a little bit more, less intense, a little quieter, a fourth tone kicked off. So the chapel was actually producing 2 tones on its own, entirely on its own, based on the 2 frequencies that were getting generated by the computer and getting generated by the guy down in the crypt. Because when he stopped toning, the 2 overtones stopped instantly, click, they just switched off, and all we were left with was the sound coming from the laptop. Then the medium, one of the mediums was with us, we had 2 mediums with us in point of fact. She turned and she said, oh, something's happening over at the St. Matthew altar. And I said, well, like what? Well, she said, come on, let's go. So she stood with her back to the altar, and I'm standing about 3 or 4 feet from her. And suddenly, the space where we're standing in went literally, bitterly, totally cold. I mean, it's never warm in the chapel, but this was colder than cold. This was boom cold. You could put your hands out to one side, and it's almost you were passing your hands through a barrier. It was warmer on one side, you'd do your hands back in again, and it was bitterly cold again. So something was happening at that point. So, to be honest, we didn't know what was going to happen next, and we kind of panicked. Because the thing was, we were very well aware that the trustees of the chapel were watching us on closed-circuit TV, because the chapel has that inside it. They were watching us, and I think we were starting to attract a bit of interest, so we had to shut the experiment down. So we do know that there is a portal there. There is a force in that chapel, right at that altar, and it can be affected by by that specific frequency. Because what we had done also, we'd created a whole set of frequencies to be used. Some of them were actually based on the name Jesus. We created Jesus. We broke them down using a system called, it's an ancient system of divination called gematria. And we actually attributed values, numerical values to the letters, and we created frequencies based on there. There was the gematria equivalents were 373 hertz, 515 hertz, and 888 hertz. We also produced a set of frequencies based on what's called the solfeggio frequencies, because as well as the church banning frequencies, it also encouraged them. Now, solfeggio frequencies are what you get in Gregorian chants, which of course were encouraged. And they ranged everything from 396 hertz up to 825 hertz, but nothing particularly high frequency, all low to medium frequencies. But we never got a chance to try these out, to be honest, because we just didn't have the time. It's as simple as that. Didn't have the time. And they won't let us back in to do it again, I might add.
This is fascinating. Not only the cubes and the hertz involved, but also the devil's chord, F sharp,
Yep.
C, and A. I mean,
Yep.
what an amazing find. And Brian, oh yes, go ahead.
No, you're okay. You're fine.
Okay, let's talk about, along these magical lines, Aleister Crowley, L. Ron Hubbard, Jack Parsons, magic dimensional portals, and a claim made by a secretive group which has made the statement, "We have in our midst a cold-hearted and sinister intelligence of demonic origins that masquerades as alien," a claim made by the group known as the Collins Elite. Can you tell us more about this group, their connections to power, and reason for saying this?
Well, yes, I can. I don't know so much about the connection to Crowley, Hubbard, and Jack Parsons, but I'm well aware of them and what they were up to. But the Collins Elite, they were a byproduct that came to, if you like, fruition in the 1950s. It was the late to mid 1950s, early 1960s. It was when they were putting groups like the Robertson panel together to investigate UFOs, their validity, and just how real they were, because there is no doubt about it. We are visited by craft, for want of a better word, beings from not, I think, other planets or star systems. I think they come from other dimensions, but that's an entirely different subject. But the Collins Elite were formed. The name came, as far as it is known, from one of the members of that group. And they were put together to try and come up with an agenda, to come up with a rationale, if you like, an answer to the UFO problem, or issue, shall we say, phenomena, better. And the trouble was, they started with an agenda, a built-in agenda. Now, they were influenced, if you like, by, shall we say, evangelical Christians in America. And their agenda was, they were not to find that UFOs were, if you like, craft crewed by beings who actually visited us. They were tasked to come out with an explanation that said they were demonic, they were satanic, and they were crewed by demons and or angels, depending on which point of view you take. So this group, that was their task. Their sole task was to find that UFOs were demonic in origin, and it was to frighten off people from even looking at it. But that was, to me, it was absolutely a ridiculous thing to start off on that basis, because you're never going to learn any truth if you start out with an agenda anyway. So that's what the Collins Elite were about.
Interesting. And, you know, it's so mysterious because when it comes to religion, they seem to keep secrets hidden away from the profane and the seekers of knowledge. And of all the mysteries in our world, one of the most mysterious, if not the most mysterious, is the secrets of the Vatican archives. And this is this is a topic that you delve into quite deeply in your book. Can you tell us a bit about the secrets of the Vatican archives and the items that are rumored to be held there?
Well, more to the point, it's the secret archives. There are Vatican archives and then there's the secret archive. The secret archives have been rumoured to consist of everything from laundry lists to shopping lists to all sorts of things, but they're not. There are items in the secret archive which are kept secret, exceedingly so, because it is thought there's stuff in there that would bring the whole Catholic Church crashing down, and in fact bring Christianity crashing down, and in fact disprove it. But as far as what's supposed to be there, well, unsurprisingly, one of the items that's there is supposed to be the bones of St. Peter, who was, of course, the founder, if you like, of the Catholic. On this rock I build my church, and that was Christ supposedly talking to St. Peter. So his bones are there. It's 7 scraps of bone that were found there, but they're so badly degraded they couldn't actually test them for DNA, but they were proclaimed by, I can't remember which pope. He decided these were the bones of St. Peter. So they were really blessed, if you like, and they're stored there as proof, if you like, of the existence of St. Peter. Also, the real third secret of Fatima is supposedly there, because I know that the 3 secrets that were revealed to the little girl were all supposedly revealed over the years. The third one, not all that terribly long ago, has been the third secret of Fatima, but that is thought to have been released for public consumption, because, as you probably know, the third secret of Fatima had to do with the end of the Catholic Church, and in fact the end of humanity itself. So that is one of the things that's still hidden in there, I think, is the real secret of Fatima. But oddly enough, grimoires are supposedly hidden there as well. Now, a grimoire, as you probably know, is a book of spells, magic spells. And the most notorious grimoire ever written was the grimoire of Pope Honorius III, which is supposed to be the most evil work ever put to pen, actually penned. Now, it was thought that priests and popes, whatever, were able to control demons, because if they could summon angels, if you like, if they could summon the godly powers, they could also control some of the non-godly satanic powers, if you like. And this book, the grimoire of Pope Honorius III, is also one of the things, among other grimoires, that's stored away in the vaults of the Vatican archive. Also, Satan is supposed to be hidden, either corralled down there, or the corpse, or the remains, or even the live Satan is supposed to be kept locked down in the Vatican archive, although you can never prove any of this because you'd never get in to see it. But other things that are down there is I suppose you could delve into science fiction here. It's a thing called the chronovisor. Now, it was a Father Emeti who was a physicist that supposedly one of the priests actually built this thing. It's a device to look into the past. They're supposed to have seen the crucifixion of Christ on it, all sorts of things. I mean, you can Google all this sort of stuff. You Google chronovisor, you'll actually see what this thing actually looked like. It was like a TV set on top of a small pedestal. I mean, it was there to be seen, and it's supposed to be made by this Father Emeti, or created by this Father Emeti, amongst others. And that's what it's designed to do, is look into the past. But also, proof of extraterrestrial life is supposed to be in there. Conclusive proof of ET. Because don't forget that the Vatican's got a couple of pretty impressive observatories, because they spend quite a lot of their time looking at the stars, although why they would do this is not clear. But they certainly spend a lot of time in it. But these are just some of the things that are supposed to be hidden away in the Vatican archive.
What a secretive place, and one that none of us, most likely, or very few of us, will ever be able to really know. And another spooky and horrific mystery covered in your book are the horrors of plagues, both ancient and modern.
Ghosts. Yeah.
Can you, and how they were dealt with, namely, the horrors of plague ghosts. Can you explain to listeners what plague ghosts are and the horrific history behind them?
Okay. Well, I came up with the title of Plague Ghosts because I wrote the piece. I wrote this particular chapter. It was based on what went on when COVID-19 hit, and there were people dying in their droves. Mm-hmm. And where are they going to bury the corpses is a thing that occurred to me, because I specifically concentrated in two areas. One, an ancient plague which affected the UK, Britain, and particularly Scotland, and it was actually a place called the Covenanters Prison in Greyfriars Churchyard in Edinburgh. But the other one, the one I'll talk about first, is Hart Island, which is just in the area of the Bronx in New York. It's on the River Hudson. And this was originally used, if you like, as a potter's field of sorts. Now, if anyone doesn't know what a potter's field is, it was people who couldn't afford to be buried, or couldn't afford to bury themselves, or if their family couldn't afford to be buried, can't have them buried, then the local authority, whoever it happened to be, they couldn't have corpses lying about, so they would have to bury them. This was no 5-star burial by any means. It was just some area of ground that was common ground that wasn't used for anything else. They used to bury them on these grounds, in this location, just whatever it happened to be. Now, Hart Island has become, if you like, a sort of a ready-made potter's grave, potter's field, because it's isolated. I mean, you've got to get a boat out. You can't sort of swim out to it or anything like that. It's got to be a proper boat trip to get there. And a lot of the dead in New York who can't afford the burial are buried on Hart Island, and it's getting more and more full all the time. They used to have a female psychiatric asylum on there. It's been used as a prison. In fact, earlier on it was used as a prison for prisoners during the Civil War. The southern prisoners were taken up there and incarcerated on Hart Island, where a lot of them died, in point of fact, but they were buried there as well. And there's been used for a whole purpose of things where you needed isolation, and you can't get more isolated than an island in the middle of a large river. And you could only get out there by official boat. You had to book your journey, so people would know who was going there. But people who have been to Hart Island, again, you can Google all this and have a look. You can actually see the place. It's not a pleasant place, I can assure you. But people have seen things while they've been there. Usually when it's misty, they'll see bodies in the mist coming towards them, but when they concentrate on them, they will disappear. But it's not the people at the time who see these things, it's people who have been there. It's almost as if they take stuff back with them, and they take it home with them. And people have woken up screaming in the night that they've seen these things coming out the mist at them in their dreams. So it's almost as if whatever spirits are on Hart Island can attach themselves to you if they so wish, and come home with you. But Hart Island is supposedly abundantly haunted, a haunted location. And this carries over, as I was saying earlier, into Edinburgh and the Covenanters Prison, because I've been in the Covenanters Prison several times. It's not a building as such. It's part of Greyfriars Churchyard in Edinburgh. And it's a strip of ground, maybe 100 metres long, maybe 10 metres wide. Yeah, about that. And both sides are lined with mausoleums, small mausoleums, where bodies are intended to be buried. A couple of them, most of them don't have roofs on them, but so they've sort of long gone. But a couple still have, and they're still used, I believe, occasionally. But the odd thing about this particular location is the number of corpses buried there. Is that it was designed, say for a figure 5,000. But this place is thought to be one of the biggest boneyards in Europe. There's ranked about there are 500,000 people buried in this cemetery. And the thing is so stuffed with corpses and the remains of bodies, is that occasionally the bones will percolate to the surface. And that happened one time we were investigating. There was a human thigh bone lying in one of the open mausoleums. And I sort of told the guy who had let us in, because they always send someone to keep an eye on what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And and he said, "Oh yeah, we'll get that buried." So he made a note, and he made a note and stuff and that. And he said it will be reinterred. But people, it's also an area that's frequented, as you would imagine, by the city's 2 or 3 ghost tours that actually operate within the city. And obviously the Covenanters prison is one of the better areas because of it's extremely atmospheric, I can assure you. Again, all Googleable, you can check all this in Google and have a look at the place at least, if nothing else. But people have been attacked. They said it was by the Mackenzie poltergeist. Now, the Mackenzie poltergeist got its name from a judge, or he was called Bloody Mackenzie because he was a judge who thoroughly relished the opportunity to send the Covenanters to the gallows, because the Covenanters back in the day, they had signed a covenant that they weren't going to accept the English version of the religion, the Protestant religion, that they would prefer their own, and they were prepared to go down fighting to do it. And this caused the Covenanter Wars. There were a couple of them, and hundreds and thousands of people got killed. But the people who were captured got stuck in this prison, which is why it's called the Covenanters Prison. And it's only an open strip of ground. It's not got any roof. There's no walls, nothing. It's just a strip of ground. And this is where they kept them, and a lot of them died before they even got to trial. But this didn't bother Mackenzie, Bloody Mackenzie, who was just quite happy to consign them to the gallows anyway. And that place is also, that particular strip of ground, not so much the rest of the cemetery, but the Covenanters Prison is also pretty comprehensively haunted.
Very interesting. And your book of secrets delves into so many mysteries that it would be impossible to cover them all. Also, on a slightly separate note, I'm blown away by not just this book, but other books you have written. One of those is The Deception of Gods and Men, which you wrote that with our mutual acquaintance, Barry Fitzgerald.
Barry Fitzgerald, yeah. In fact, I was talking to Barry on Skype a couple of days ago. We're always in contact.
And that is a book that I had him on the podcast discussing, and I want to highly recommend it as well to listeners. So a little bit of a tangent there. But your book of secrets delves into so many mysteries that, yes, it would be impossible to cover them all. Another topic you cover, and I'm glad you did, was time travel and Al and the Montauk Project. Can you explain to listeners what Al and I believe his brother experienced?
Well, Al Bielek and his brother, they both claim to have travelled in time. Myself, I'm always a bit twitchy about time travel. In point of fact, I was sent a film to review, a DVD, and it was a TV series of the 12 Monkeys. I don't know if you ever remember that, which is about indirectly time travel. Mm-hmm. But it's a fascinating series, fascinating film in point of fact. But Bruce Willis is in the film. I think Brad Pitt was in it as well. But Billick and the whole thing about time travel. Well, the Montauk Project, I think that's off New York, isn't it? It's one of the islands close to New York, I think. Mm-hmm. Montauk?
Yes.
I think so, yeah. Well, the whole Montauk Project is based on concepts, scientific concepts that are way out there. They're supposed to have had a chair and part of it, and this was part of the setup, that people could be put in this chair. And as far as I can make out, it wasn't physical transportation in time. It was mental, if you like. Yeah, mental consciousness getting transferred in time. But what this managed to do, I believe, was pull in some creature that ended up on the island. And this creature is supposedly still out there, and it has been seen supposedly by people. But for all they claim that there's nothing to be seen there, that nothing to see here, guys, nothing to see here, it's certainly locked off, and they don't encourage visitors by any manner of means. And anyone caught in the grounds is given very short shrift and shown the exit very quickly and told not to come back. Because it is highly likely that there is stuff still on that island on Montauk that is highly classified, and they don't want people messing with it, because I think what they did was that they opened a doorway that they couldn't shut. And I think that is a very dangerous thing to do, because this is why I always implore people. I gave up ghost hunting years ago because I got too many frights with it, dangerous frights. Because it reminds me of a saying by Wilhelm Nietzsche, which goes a bit like this. It goes, "Battle not with monsters lest you become a monster." But the important part is, and if you gaze into the abyss gazes also into you. And trust me, it does. Because once you start messing with this sort of thing, you're starting to mess with things that would rather you didn't. And they will make it, if you get too close to them, they'll make it very clear that they're going to smack your wrist and warn you. Because if you don't, they can make it very, very hard for you. And I have no doubt of this whatsoever because I've experienced it firsthand. I know what they can do.
This is so very true. I cannot impress that enough among our listeners because I've seen this myself, not only in my own life, but other people as well. That's good you stopped ghost hunting, Brian. And another mystery that absolutely has to be covered, which is mentioned in your book, is the question of our past. How did our ancestors manage to, so long ago and without the use of modern construction techniques and heavy equipment, build our pyramids? Can we go into that enigma a little bit?
A little bit, perhaps, because you're looking at a program's worth of stuff here.
Yes.
Really. But yeah. But the whole thing about the pyramids is, I think, and I've thought this for many years now, that I think we underestimate what our ancestors were capable of. Because they weren't stupid. Let's face it, they weren't by no means stupid. And they did things just by sheer grunt, if you like, by sheer manpower and ropes. Some of it they did. Some of it I very much doubt. There are 1,000-ton blocks. Is it Baalbek? I think about Baalbek. They're like 1,000-ton blocks of stone that have been set in place. Now, how they did that? I don't think 1,000 men with 1,000 ropes could do that. I think they had to have a little bit of help somewhere. Now, I do believe that I've heard the techniques involving sonics, vibration. Again, get back to frequency. Because let's face it, everything's based on frequency, irrespective of what it is. The TV set I'm looking at, the TV monitor I'm looking at, the keyboard in front of me, they're all based on frequency at some point. Every component in them is based on frequency. So I think I've heard tell that when they were setting these vast blocks into place, that the local shaman, as what they would pass as a shaman, what we would call a shaman, would come up with a rod of some kind and would tap the stone. And this started the stone vibrating, and it started to oscillate very, very quickly. And it almost overcome the inertia of the stone. They could actually shift the stone around and move it around it wasn't easy, but relatively easily, at least they could move it. And once they got it set into place fairly neatly, and that was exactly where they wanted it to be, the shaman would come up again and ding, he would strike the stone again, and this would settle it out. It would shut down the vibration, and the thing would sort of set down, and it would become this 1,000-ton block of stone that was in effect immovable, but by humans, irrespective of how many there were. But how they actually lifted these things is another kettle of fish I'm not sure about. But I suspect it was a lot to do with vibration and frequency as well. If they could sufficiently reduce the vibration and frequency of these blocks of stone, they could be lifted with a bit. I mean, you need a lot of people to do it, but they could nevertheless be lifted and set in place again, then, if you like, shut down, and then the vibration would cease, and they would seat themselves down again. So I'm pretty sure that was a lot to do with it.
Yes, there is so much mystery surrounding that, wild theories, the way they are all positioned. There's so much to that. And a very difficult topic that you managed to tackle, which was also difficult in your Book of Secrets, is the sacred Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
As far as listeners are concerned, I know many people don't even know what it might be. Can you explain to listeners what was the Ark of the Covenant, what might it be, and a bit about it?
Well, biblically, the Ark of the Covenant is a specific size. It was designed, as far as I know, to act as a receptacle, a holder for documentation relating to the information that was received by Moses from God, as far as I remember. But I think it was rather more than that. I think the way it was constructed, to the specific dimensions it was constructed, and the fact that it was made of specific materials, almost like a capacitor, I think it was an electrical device of some kind. I think it was a machine, and it was designed to do something. I know that people supposedly got killed by going too close to it when they weren't supposed to. But I think the Ark of the Covenant, although the Bible talks about it as being a receptacle, I think it was rather more than that. I think it might have been a communications device as well.
Yes, it very likely. And one of my favorite mysterious people was covered in your book of secrets, and that's a person who goes by many nicknames and was involved with non-lethal weaponry, and that is Colonel John Alexander.
Yeah, Colonel Alexander. Yeah. Quite a guy. Although long retired, the guy was called up to active service in Afghanistan. He was there for a number of months. It was to do with interviewing techniques, shall we say. His claim to fame, I believe, was sticky foam. It was one of the non-lethal technologies that he actually had produced. My idea was instead of shooting people and killing them, you sprayed them with a sticky foam, which it was a bit like the kind of foam builders use in some respect. That once it goes out, it comes out initially in a fairly small volume, but it rapidly expands. It was like an expanding foam that was sticky, and you could literally wrap people up in this stuff, and they just couldn't move. I think there was some sort of solvent used to get it off, but that was one of these things with sticky foam. But Alexander, he's been involved in Stargate. He was involved. I'm trying to remember the Hutchison effect. I think you've heard of that. The Hutchison effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I believe Colonel Alexander was one of the people that ended up in Canada, looking at what John Hutchison claimed to have discovered in his laboratory. And the thing about that whole thing was that they took a set of readings in his laboratory. They got as much information as they could, and Alexander included. They wouldn't tell him what they'd found. They said it was classified. Now, even the Canadian government investigated what Hutchison was up to, and even they said what they found was classified. So Hutchison never actually found out what he had going there. But you can guarantee that whatever he had, they were going to weaponize it if they possibly could, because that's what governments and defense departments do. If they can find something new that they can weaponize, they can and will do it. So, basically, Colonel John Alexander, he has been involved in a lot of stuff, highly secret. You will never actually find out what he's been involved in, but you can guarantee it'll be pretty esoteric. Absolutely guaranteed.
Yes, he does seem to have that mysterious persona, and Alexander was also, as you said, a part of so much. He was a part of NIDS, which was under
NIDS,
Bigelow.
Yeah.
So
well, the thing was, I was once in email contact with Colonel Alexander. He was decent enough to return the emails, and I did ask him about what was going on with the Hutchison effect, and he said that the effects were micro rather than macro. But he wouldn't be drawn on it. I asked him to elaborate. No, he wasn't having it, I'm afraid. No, just wouldn't have it. But the thing was, it got to a stage where I just stopped emailing because he was just blockade. He was just blocking me. Anything I said, he would just block it. He obviously wasn't going to talk, and he wasn't going to talk then, and he still isn't going to talk now, because that guy carries so much in his head that people would love to know what that guy has worked on.
Yes, he is an enigma. And kind of going along those same lines, your book also tackles the difficult subject of psychic warfare. And there's no doubt this happens in the intelligence agencies.
Yep.
What is your experience with that, and what could you tell listeners about that? Well,
this whole thing, I don't know if you remember a book called The Men Who Stare at Goats.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was John Ronson's book. A nice guy, John. This was psychic warfare, and the whole concept of that was to weaponize thought, for want of a better word. That they wanted people to be able to stop they wanted someone to stop the heart of any given person that was pointed out. I wanted to stop their hearts, or kill them, in other words. And they did this, using goats initially at Fort Meade. I wrote to Fort Meade once about this, and just got an answer. Nothing happened here, mate. Nothing happened here, But they had the goat labs set up in Fort Meade, and they had 20 or 30 goats there. They'd been debleated shall we say, because they didn't want to upset people that were hearing the noise. But they used to do all sorts of things to these goats. They would break their legs and all the rest of it and have soldiers come and patch them up. They used them for battlefield training, if you want. But one of the other factions of it was they selected various soldiers who claimed to have or thought they had psychic abilities. And they took them along to the goat labs and they had them to try and kill these goats by staring at it. And to the best of my knowledge, none of the soldiers could actually do it. But they did have, I mean, there are a lot of people who were involved. The Stargate was also on the same site, I believe, Stargate project. But the goat labs was something a bit special because some of the people they had there, they found that the person that could do this was not, in fact, a soldier. His name, well, it's in the book, so I guess I can give his name. The guy was called Guy Savelli. And he is thought to have been able to stop a goat's heart by just wishing it so. And they tried to weaponize that, but they found the whole thing, although it appeared to work, and he did it more than once, they couldn't weaponize it to make it sufficiently reliable to use as a tool for war. So the whole thing was given up. In fact, the whole Stargate project was wound up officially because they said it wasn't reliable enough. And the Pentagon wasn't like a bottomless pit of money that it appears to be. And they didn't want to be throwing money at something they couldn't rely on. So the whole Stargate project was allegedly written off and stopped. But I personally don't think that is the case. I think that Stargate does work. And I think that depending on how it works, then aspects of it can be used, and I think still are used. But that's purely personal opinion. Because anything that could give, say, the US military an edge, or any military an edge, because I know here in the UK that they had an equivalent of Stargate going on as well. Although with the British obsession with secrecy, you'd never get to know one way or another. But fortunately in America, because of the way your system works, your political system works, these things tend to get out eventually, because you'll get a whistleblower of some sort will actually start revealing it to the public. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure that Stargate was efficient, and although it was officially shut down, I don't think it was. I think it still goes. It's got it under another name. But I'm pretty sure Stargate still works, and remote viewing still works.
I agree. I don't believe Stargate was stopped either. Maybe repackaged, renamed, or manned by other operatives, but I couldn't agree more. And lastly, another difficult topic that your Book of Secrets covers is psychotronic warfare, mind-controlled, MK Ultra, and Dr. Ewan Cameron. Can we discuss that just a bit?
Yeah, well, Ewan Cameron, to my shame, was born not all that far away from where I live, in point of fact. But what Ewan Cameron was doing, I think, was absolutely disgraceful. Now, he was doing it on behalf at the behest of the U.S. intelligence services, and he was doing it in Canada. So the U.S. intelligence could say quite legitimately, it's not getting done in their country, it's nothing to do with us, but it was. And what Cameron was up to, he was trying to develop techniques, if you like, to de-pattern people, to reprogram their brains. And he was doing this with a mixture of psychedelic chemicals. He was doing it by rendering them unconscious for weeks at a time, pumping them full of psychedelics, all sorts of stuff. And he was trying to de-pattern every sort of available thought these people had. And when they were brought out of this induced trance, for want of a better word, they had to be taught how to use a toilet. They were in nappies, napkins. They had to wear napkins for a while because they were literally, going all over the place because they couldn't help themselves. They didn't know how to not do it. And had to be patterned and retrained. And this was the idea, to create, if you like, the perfect soldier, the perfect assassin, if you want. It's rather like the Manchurian Candidate, I suppose, if you remember that film, where the North Koreans are supposed to have done this to an American soldier or whatever. Mm-hmm. But, you remember the film. But I think they persisted with this, but they found out what was happening was that they couldn't fully eliminate the original personality, and eventually, in spite of all the depatterning and reprogramming that went on, the original personality would in fact re-emerge at some point, and it would start taking over and drive out this artificial personality that had been ingrained into the person. and they could come back and be the person that had been. But again, militaries, and it pains me to say this, but militaries, I suppose, are very pragmatic about this sort of thing. And they will do anything that they think is going to help the government and help their country and save their country. And I can't say it altogether blame them for that, because it's what they're supposed to do, it's what they're trained to do, it's what they're paid to do, for heaven's sake. But I also think that human beings do have inalienable rights. And I don't think it's right to do that to people, to completely destroy them and try and rebuild them in another pattern. So it's a yes and no thing. I understand why they're doing it, but I don't agree with it.
I couldn't agree more. There should be some lines in the sand that should not be crossed. And lastly, thank you so much for coming on the podcast with me. We had some scheduling woes, and you were very cordial, and you worked with me very much, and I appreciate that, Brian. This is such a great book, such a great contribution to those of us who are interested in these topics, and it's so well packaged, cleanly written, as I said, and put into context. Where is the best place folks can purchase your book and keep up with your work and efforts?
Well, if they're only looking for the book itself, it's Book of Secrets, Aliens, Ghosts, and Ancient Mysteries. It's published by Flying Disc Press, and it's certainly available on Amazon. Absolutely guaranteed it's available on Amazon as a Kindle or as a hard copy or as a paperback. It's available in all these. But as far as I'm concerned, what I'm up to, especially with the magazine, Phenomena magazine, if they just type in, go on the internet, www.phenomenamagazine, all one word, phenomenamagazine.co.uk, they will get to the magazine. But for me, rather than give out my website, it's simpler if you just type in Brian Allan, BrianAllan, paranormal, or Brian Allan, UFO. You're guaranteed to find me, because I'm all over the place on the net, to my shame.
Oh, it's great. You're such a great author with, I think, over 14 books, and you've delved into so many of the mysteries of our time. Can't thank you enough, Brian. Thanks for coming on.
You're more than welcome, and God bless you, and thank you very much for having me, Ryan. Thank you.
Book of Secrets, Aliens, Ghosts, and Ancient Mysteries. Well, there we have it. My gosh, Brian Allan. What a talented author. Over 14 books, delving into secrets of the mysteries of our times, many of those things that other authors are unwilling to tackle. So much experience of the esoteric, the Gnostic, and the paranormal for over 25 years. And this book is such a great contribution to those of us who are interested in these topics. I really do recommend, if you have someone on your list for Christmas and you don't know what to get them, it will cover many of the secrets, the ufology, and the mysteries of our time. A very engaging book, no matter what your background. I highly recommend you purchase some for those people on your Christmas list. Until next time, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around.
Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off.